welcome to Really
Whoa.
with Tom and Dave. Although I shouldn't really need to tell people that if they're watching, they should know what they're watching.
But it's like I mean, someone shows up at your house, you say, "Welcome. Hey, welcome to Really with
To my
Tom and
house
Dave."
that you're in. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. How are you, buddy?
Well, welcome. I'm well. It's getting very wintry here
Yeah,
in New York.
baby.
Yeah, yeah,
Holidays.
yeah.
Woohoo.
Yeah, I'll be flying out to LA and when tomorrow. I'll be flying out to LA
We're ready
tomorrow.
to see you.
I'll see you. Yeah, looking
Yes.
forward to it.
Even Christmas Eve potentially. We'll see.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know what's going
Definitely.
on, but
Definitely. Yeah.
love to have you.
Yeah, and, but I'm looking forward to today, to this
Today's
discussion.
awesome. Yes, I
Yeah,
was all like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, got all these questions written down. We got a fantastic guest to close out 2023. We're doing it in style. This is our sort of last podcast of the year, I guess. And so, without further ado, Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich served as one of the nation's first female strike fighter aviators as an FA-18 pilot from 2001 to 2021. She flew in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. She has since taught leadership, ethics, and critical thinking at the George Washington University, U.S. Naval Academy, and now serves on the faculty of the University of Colorado School of Engineering in Boulder. Alex is an advocate for Legacy Flight Academy, a foundation that promotes diversity in aviation, and Wings for Val, supporting women in aviation. Alex is also currently part of the Aircrew Leadership Council for Americans for Safe Aerospace, and we're thrilled to have her with us today. She was also a witness of one of probably the most famous
yeah,
UAP cases in our
probably
history.
one of the most important,
Yes, our
incidents in,
modern day Roswell. And hi, Alex.
Hi. Hi
Hi,
from
Alex.
Boulder.
Hi, good to
Hello.
see you
Hello.
again.
Good to see you. Hey, Dave. Hi,
Yeah.
Tom.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your service. This is great. Been really
Yeah.
looking forward to this conversation. And so, look, so many cool aspects of the story. I mean, I'll want, we want to talk about Tic Tac and all that, but I'm just, your journey is so interesting. I'm just curious, like, who are your heroes growing up?
Oh, wow. So when
Mhm.
I was growing up, I was really into math and science.
Mhm.
And so I was very fortunate to go to a school in Chicago, the Illinois Math and Science Academy. And so our heroes were the founders, Leon Letterman, Nobel physicist, and Carl Sagan, and these folks who had big dreams and sort of wild ideas about what might be possible and out there, but also brought the receipts.
Right.
They made sure that it was grounded in data and evidence and tangible science.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When you're at that school, are you thinking, I want to apply this sort of engineering or this science to being a pilot, or were you still kind of exploring, like, how
Yeah.
did that come? How did that become something, a dream of yours?
I mean,
Yeah,
most
not at all.
mathematicians do become fighter pilots, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
Really?
I
I
I
don't
think so.
know.
Yeah.
Statistically,
It's
yeah.
I
yeah.
definitely wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You can have any degree and be a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
I flew with folks who were geography majors.
Yeah.
No offense to the geography majors, but
No,
Well, I'm
I mean, I assume
yeah.
that's a component, right? I mean, it's good.
yeah, I guess that's
Know
a
where
type
you are,
of
right?
science.
Yeah. Well, I'm a high school dropout, so I'm not gonna slam geography majors. Yeah. But yeah, well,
Yeah, no,
when
I had zero interest in actually applying the Math and Science Foundation. I had a college counselor in the latter years of high school who said, "You need to declare a major, and you need to have have to have a plan. You have to," and that's what it sounded like when he was talking to me. It was this very like
yeah.
thunderous,
In a mic.
ominous voice,
Mhm.
and he said, "You gotta get it all. Get your shit together, Alex."
Yeah.
He didn't say that, but he did not so many words. And we had these tests, we had these assessments to figure out what we would be well suited to do. We took personality tests, we took these career you should be a park ranger, or you should be a surgeon. And my test came back all over the place. You should be a surgeon in the park kind of thing. And
Ranger.
so, yeah. And so he said, look, where do you see yourself when you're 40? Look back. What do you want to have accomplished? Where do you want to be? And I thought, okay, this is an interesting thought experiment. All the 40-year-olds I know are going through a midlife crisis. They're on their second career. They're getting divorced. And he said, no, that's not what I had in
What do I have to choose from?
mind.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, this is actually really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I said, this tells me that I need to have my midlife crisis up front, that I need to get it out of the way. And then I can settle down and think about career and family and all of that.
So you bought a Corvette.
I well, I on my forms, right, where it said, what do you want to major in and what do you want to do with your life? I said, I either want to be a rock star or a fighter pilot. And I'm tone deaf, so couldn't be a rock star. And so one thing led to another, and I found myself in the strike fighter pipeline.
Yeah, and because you didn't just decide to be a pilot, you decided to
Yeah.
become a fighter pilot.
Yeah. I mean, there's got to be a moment where you're like, oh, like shit, this is really happening. I mean, I'm really doing this.
And you're also enlisting in the military to become that.
Right. Well, for a hot minute, I thought maybe I would go to the military academies. First, I thought I would go to the Air Force because I naively thought if you want to fly, you go into the Air Force. But actually, if you want to fly, you go into the Navy because the Navy has more flight opportunities. But then, it was all about me. It was about my selfish adventure. It was about, scratching my own itch. And you had to get a degree. You had to get a 4-year degree. So I went through ROTC in order to graduate and commission. And I graduated in May of 2001, went off to flight school, ground school. And then I had my first flight in the aircraft on 9/11. So,
Walk us through that day.
Yeah, it was a nightmare, as it was, I think for the world. It was a paradigm shift, and I realized it's not about me and my selfish adventure, and I've taken an oath. I am a military officer. What the hell does that mean? And how do I do this? And how do I contribute in a meaningful way? So, I've had an adventure, certainly, traveled around the world several times and saw a UFO along the way. So, when I advise my students, I always tell them, you think you have a plan, you think you want something or you know something, and the universe will have its way with you, and you can just try to make the best of it.
Did you say your first flight was so it was like the first time you're in the
September of 2001? Yeah.
So you're piloting for the first time that day?
Yeah. So we didn't get very far. Obviously, everything was grounded.
Turned around, right?
Situation evolved. Yeah. But then and the base that I was going through this flight training, it was in Texas. We didn't have security around the perimeter. It used to be that we would just drive in every morning. We didn't have to stop at a checkpoint at the sentry and show an ID or have our vehicles searched. And so there was a delay. All of our training stopped for a few weeks while they literally physically went around and secured the base. And we were on hold. And then when we came back, it was a totally different mindset. We had this sense of urgency because we were catching up. And then also this bigger, again, this paradigm shift of we are going to go into harm's way, and we are going to go and I don't want to say retaliate, but we are going to go deal with this new situation of
And
national.
were you
national
deployed
security.
overseas after 9/11?
Right. So the flight training that was the very beginning when 9/11 happened, and so I had to go through primary, where we learned just the basics, the basic maneuvers, the basic aerodynamics, And for me, that was in the T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor, just a little single, kind of like a little Cessna or Piper that you would see at an airfield. And then I went through the T-45 pipeline, so T-45 Alpha, Goshawks. Those are a jet aircraft. And then into the F-18 Fleet Replacement Squadron. So by the time I got through that whole, several phases of that pipeline, it was the summer of 2004 when I joined my fleet squadron, the VFA 41 Black Aces.
Yeah, and then something else happened in 2004. I'm trying to remember what it was.
I don't recall.
That kind of added.
It was like an election or something, or was it a?
No, I know what it was. You
Earthquake?
saw you and this other fella, David Fravor. You encountered a 40-foot long Tic Tac.
Oh, that, yes.
Yeah, that seemed to be untethered from reality in front of you.
Right.
Now this is like and
This
when
is all
happens,
happening at once. So are
Yeah.
you? But you're
and
deployed.
training
But
for deployment, right? At this point.
No, so I just joined the squadron.
Yeah.
I actually joined the squadron as they were conducting a large force exercise in Alaska. And so we went up to Alaska and we flew around Denali and conducted the exercises up there. And then when we came back to I guess I was about to say back to the States, but Alaska is a state.
Well, yeah.
Back to the continental
allegedly,
United
yes, yes.
It should be a province, but whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But we came home. Then we were preparing to deploy. So our pre-deployment workups include conducting these exercises and training from our own jet base, which on the West Coast is in Lemoore, California, which is not beach and sand, California. It's middle of nowhere in the San Joaquin Valley, which is good for flying because people don't complain about the noise and there's access to plenty of ranges and open space to do our maneuvers and practice on our, these target ranges where we can do drop ordnance and not bother anybody. But so then the aircraft carriers that we deploy on, that we actually go out and do these around the world missions. At the time, our carrier was based out of San Diego. And so we come in together, we converge, and we conduct these exercises. And so that's what was happening in November of 2004. It was a pre-deployment workup cycle where we had gone down to stay on the ship for several weeks and then integrate for our operations, exercise our systems, our hardware, and practice our maneuvers off the coast of Southern California.
I do have to ask a question. How scary is it to land on an aircraft carrier? I mean, how is that? Is that as advertised, as terrifying as it seems, or
pretty much? It's
what's your first landing like on an aircraft? I mean, do you have to loop around a few times?
So I actually don't remember my very first carrier landing, and it was on the East Coast off of Florida in the T-45 in the Goshawk. And I should say that, the reason that it takes us a while to get through flight school is because it's very systematic. It's very methodical. Everything has a checklist. Everything has a curriculum. We have ground school courses. We have simulators where you sit there and you touch the buttons and you practice the flow and you practice the hand-eye coordination and look at the sight pictures before you're even in an aircraft. And then when you're in the aircraft, you have a flight instructor with you and you watch one, you do one, you do another one, you do it again and again. And we have at the airfield, the Fresnel lens, this array of lights and mirrors that replicate the aircraft carrier's system. It's what you use to come in on glide slope. You want to be on glide slope and you want to be on airspeed. And so there's this, you can imagine this, if the ship is right here, there's this sort of cone coming back out. And so you come around in your aircraft and you get into that cone and then it narrows down. You need to keep on the numbers. And so you practice that a lot at the field before you go to the boat.
Mhm.
And it still kind of takes.
Yeah, it's still building. Like you're still
Yeah.
going like, oh shit, I still have to actually do this. Yeah.
So my first time off the coast of Florida, we had an instructor lead us out, like little baby birds on the wing, all in formation. And we went out and he said over the radio, there it is at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock low. And I look out and all I saw was water. And I couldn't see because the ship was so small at the altitude we were at, and we weren't that high. But I remember looking at it and thinking, well, I tried. I made it this far.
Yeah, I'm up here as well. Yeah. How long can I stay up here?
Yeah, well, gave it a shot. And then, we spiraled down, and there's a whole, again, pre-brief practice maneuver to get down to the altitude where you're sort of in this pattern. And anybody who's flown around an airfield understands the pattern, the sight picture, and that there's set airspeeds and configurations. And so once I got down into that mode, and I had my tapes turned on to record it. And so I'm chatting and I'm talking to myself, saying, hi, Mom, hi. And then there's that moment where I finally see the ship and I go, oh, well, no, well, we made it this far. Okay, well, good try.
Mhm.
It's okay if we don't make it any further. And then it goes silent. And so that's where I think that I went from my sort of prefrontal cortex back to the limbic brain and just went off of muscle memory because I land, the arresting cable sort of stretches out, and then I start to taxi around and follow the direction of the folks on the deck. And then I start talking again and I go, oh, wow, yeah, this is exciting. And holy shit, that just happened.
Yeah.
But when I watched the tape later, I was sharing it with my family at the holidays or something. I said, what happened? Did you lose did the audio cut out? And I said, no, I just must have stopped talking because I was overwhelmed.
You were in the zone.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
in the survival zone and a training
Yeah.
zone.
I was gonna say,
That's
when you're actually landing on the aircraft
wild.
carrier, it's a little more unpredictable than landing on a simulation on land, isn't it? There's because it
is.
isn't stationary
Yeah, things gotta be, I mean,
entirely, right?
moving.
Right. And in that initial, right, when we're students, the conditions have to be very calm sea state, and the weather has to be really good. But then when you get into the fleet and you have more experience and more confidence, then we really push the envelope in terms of minimums of cloud layers and maximums of pitching deck, this sort of
Mhm.
Bucky Bronco.
Yeah.
And then, so besides the Fresnel lens, this light and mirror contraption that we reference with our eyes to keep us in that right space that we're supposed to be in, there's also a set of individuals, they're called LSOs, landing signal officers, on the deck. And I don't know, maybe you've seen the, what's the spoof of Top Gun?
Oh,
Is it Hot Shots?
Hot Shots, yes.
Perhaps. How do you say hot shots?
Hot Shots.
Shots?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. Where the guys he's
Charlie
got the
Sheen.
big glasses and and they've got the
Mm.
paddles and they're waving and stuff. So those folks are their eyes are calibrated after watching so many folks come in. And so they help us. They're on the radio talking and letting us know if it's
They're saying, yeah, this ain't gonna work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Abort. Yeah. Oh
Or
man,
just
that's scary.
forget it.
Yeah.
Just regret all of your life decisions.
Turn around. Exactly. This was all for naught. Was your family like when you said I'm going to be a Navy fighter pilot? Was that like, oh yeah, that sounds like Alex, of course, makes perfect sense, or was it? Are you crazy? Like what was there? Or there's a mix of opinions on that?
Yeah. No, they were supportive. I don't think they really understood what I was getting into, and it wasn't like I just was, graduated and was suddenly a fighter pilot. There were several. It was a
Right.
slow drip disclosure, if you will,
Mhm.
that, at first I was going to flight school and, I could have flown helicopters. I could have flown, cargo transport. And so it took a while to evolve. And again, this sort of 9/11
Yeah, that
in the
changes
in the
things.
Yeah.
background, yeah,
Yeah.
that sort of changed everybody's mindset.
You have an ability to do something like that's what's so interesting. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's just there was so much helplessness, so much of a feeling of helplessness, and I don't know. What was that like to know you could do something about it in some ways? You know what I mean? Respond. You could react to it in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think at the time I was really thinking about that. Um, I was really busy learning these systems, learning these maneuvers, uh, was relatively isolated.
Mhm.
These locations where we have our flight schools and our flight training, where we go on detachments to practice, they're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And
Now
they,
Right.
you're
and
sort
and
of
and these workups and the training, like the procedures you go through, like how much time is spent preparing you for, UFO encounters?
none,
None.
0.
No,
Well,
no.
that
Yeah.
seems like an awfully big, oversight considering.
No, we train like we fight so that we can fight like we train. We don't like surprises. We want everything to be muscle memory. We want when things are overwhelming that we can fall back on our checklists and fall back on our training. So, we were preparing for air to air and air to ground missions, and we set up those scenarios. We set up the target ranges. We set up um, our briefs and everything so that it's these you know, these expected normal scenarios, and some of those are quite terrifying. Some of those are
Mhm.
it's hard to wrap your head around. If I am doing this, then things have gone terribly wrong
Right.
in the world.
Mhm.
And so there really wasn't either space in the curriculum or appetite to inject
Yeah.
a UFO protocol.
So you'd be looking at scenarios including up to, like, a nuclear engagement, I'm guessing,
Right.
Hmm.
which is, something I think most of us, try to avoid thinking about at all,
Right.
um, as opposed to thinking about, well, if a nuclear war breaks out, what is my responsibility and what do I have to do?
Right.
So, that's a pretty huge thing
It's incredible to
to even have
contemplate.
to contemplate, yeah. And so, yeah, so in the throes this is still, I guess, this is early in your career as a fighter pilot, and then this sort of weird, um, event gets thrown at you that
What?
go on.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, there's going to be a portion of our audience that has heard this story. But also there's a big portion of our audience that haven't heard this story. Just like if you can take us through that day. And how do you? When did you meet David Fravor? Is it around the same time, or have you guys been working together for a long time at this point? Or
So he was the executive officer, turning over to be the commanding officer of the VFA 41 Strike Fighter Squadron when I checked in that summer of 2004. And so by November 14th, 2004, which is the date of the event that we're um, talking about here, he was the commanding officer of the squadron and one of the most senior aircrew, if not the most senior pilot in the entire air wing. So an air wing consists of multiple squadrons. So you have your Hornet squadrons, you have your helicopter squadrons, you have your Prowler at the time, which is now the Growler, so your electronic attack squadron. And so you have multiple groups of officers and enlisted maintainers who are responsible for their batch of aircraft. And then all of that is sitting on an aircraft carrier that has, up to 3,000 people taking care of all of the, from their radars and sensors and weapons to, care and feeding of all of these people, making sure that, we have drinking water and we have supply and logistics, food and fuel, and everything in between. So it is really this magnificent orchestra of people and logistics. And so, David Fravor is the commanding officer of one squadron among this entire, the carrier operations, and then the carrier is within the carrier strike group, several other ships. So if you've ever played Battleship,
I have.
Yes.
As close as I've gotten to combat,
Yeah.
yes, I have played Battleship.
So the carrier is that big piece, and then you have probably a submarine and a cruiser and a destroyer and the other bits. So you can imagine this is sort of a game of Battleship.
Yeah, which I find very stressful.
Yes.
So yeah, just that the game.
And we have to stay on the grids. Actually, I didn't know if you knew that we have to.
Well, yeah, you got to line up, right? Like I've got,
Yeah, we're not allowed to go diagonally.
Oh, I quietly move my pieces around.
Yeah, that's cheating, Dave. It's not.
Oh,
I knew you did.
no, I didn't know.
That's messed up.
That's why I don't play with you.
Yeah.
And so you're playing this giant version of Battleship.
The real version.
Yes. So here we are.
You're in a nice training mission.
Yeah, it's hey, let's go out and practice. We don't have any live ordnance. We're off the coast of San Diego, so we want to be fierce but not reckless. And we launch late morning, clear skies, calm waters, and we are expecting to go out and scrimmage against another squadron. So we have a pre-briefed working area, some coordinates that we have said, this is our piece of the sky to deconflict from other people working in this military operating area. MOA is what we call it. And we're not expecting any.
Yeah, and it's just you and you're flying your jet, and David Fravor's flying his. So it's just the two of you out on this maneuver?
So we each have a weapons systems officer on board. And so 2 aircraft, 4 people. 4 sets of eyes, 4 brains. And then there are other aircraft from our carrier strike group in the vicinity. But we're not expecting commercial airliners. We're not expecting any other traffic to be coming through our space.
Yeah, it's restricted airspace that you're in.
Exactly. And so we launch, and we're in our administrative phase of flight. So this is when we, we've just taken off. We make sure that everything's working on our aircraft. We're making sure that our comms are working, our radios are good. This is when we have a drink, take a snack, do all of that before we get into our tactical phase of
soft
flight.
Drink.
Yeah, you're eating lunch up there in the plane?
Just pop a little soda. No, but we carry camelbacks or things like that. And so if you need water and hydration.
And some pemmican.
I don't know what that is.
What is that?
It's a Native American form of dried meat.
So it's jerky.
Does that come with every jet?
It's jerky. Yeah, it's
jerky.
Yeah, it's jerky.
We all know it is jerky.
Yeah.
I call it a meat stick.
Yes.
Meat stick.
That sounds rude. But so you're there. You're having your sip of water, and things are still normal at this point.
Things are normal. Things are boring. Really, it's day in the office, and then the air traffic controller for our military exercise. So they're on another ship, but they're part of our carrier strike group. They come up and they say, hey, we're going to give you vectors to this contact. And there's a bit of pushback because we say, no, that's not where we're going. We briefed we were going over here. And, they say, we need you to check this out. It's a real world contact. And so that's the point where we got excited and said, oh, okay, post 9/11, we're off the coast of California, and we should all, the hair on the back of our necks should stand up. And again, I'm the most junior person in the flight, and still learning everything, and feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all. And so I asked the more senior weapons systems officer in my back seat, I said, what do you think is going on? And he said, I don't know, maybe it's drug runners coming up the coast, from
Like private
Mexico.
planes, right? It's going into airspace that aren't, maybe paying
Yeah, they're
attention.
trying to evade our radars and sneak up with some contraband or something like that. And so I said, ooh, that's exciting. That is real world. But, what are we going to do about it? We can intercept them, but we don't have any weapons on board. Yeah. And I mean, would we be cleared to engage them anyway? Or are we just going to, give them very stern looks?
And scare them away. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Hey,
that'd be enough for me. But
right.
probably not drug runners.
Still buzz them pretty alarmingly, I imagine.
Yeah.
Right. So we could nudge them and strongly suggestive wing flashes to get them to try to maybe land at Brownfield. So, which is parallel runway to Tijuana International, by the way, which I almost tried to land on once.
Mm-hmm.
Thought I was going into Brown, and I was lined
Quick
up
trip
on
to
Tijuana.
TJ, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
So as this radar picture is evolving and the tracks are coming towards a merge plot, which is where the little dots on their radar screen are becoming distinguishable, we start to look outside and we try to pick up a visual tally. And this is where sort of the commotion begins of folks shouting on the radio between our two aircraft and the four people. So we have two radio channels, one that we use to talk up and out, so talking to those air traffic controllers and people outside of our flight, and then a radio that we talk in. It's our tactical channel, so between the two aircraft. And then in each aircraft, you have the ICS or the intercom between the front seat and the back seat. So there's multiple conversations going on at the same time. And all of them are getting excited as there's a visual contact or tally of this water disturbance, which I don't know whether it's related to the UFO that we saw or not. But if it hadn't been for the water disturbance, I don't know that I would have picked up a tally, because it acted as a sort of funneling feature or an anchor point for me to get a visual on the white water and then see this Tic Tac flying above it. So we call it a Tic Tac because that's what it looked like. It looked like the little white breath mints. Dave, do they have those in Canada?
They do, but they're 40% smaller. Yeah, so the value isn't as good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A smaller Tic Tac.
So,
okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Alex. He distracted us.
No, I'm still trying to think about like how the packaging.
Yeah, I know.
Would work.
It's like it's completely round.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, everything's big. Everything's bigger in America. That's just one of the things we live with as Canadians. Everything's bigger and brighter. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually on our money.
We try
in Latin.
And, yeah. So you're seeing this. Tic Tac.
Wait, can I ask about the whitewater though? Because
you asking me or
that does seem coincidental. I'm going to ask Alex, Dave.
Okay, good. All right.
If you don't mind, she's our our guest today.
All right.
I have always been curious about. I mean, it does seem coincidental that was occurring around the appearance of the Tic Tac, I suppose. I mean, did you, in retrospect or in the moment, attribute it at all to perhaps the movement of the Tic Tac creating some effect, or did you believe or detect that there might be something under the water, or see anything that might be under the water that was making that commotion?
So in the moment, I had no idea what was causing the whitewater, and I had no sense of what the Tic Tac was. When we came back to the ship and we were debriefing with intel and trying to say, well, what could it have been, right? Let's brainstorm some theories and some alternative theories. One of the theories was that we might have seen a submarine launching something and that it was, going under or that's what was happening there. I have since been reassured that there was no submarine in the area and it wouldn't make sense that there would be a live fire or a launch or a test of anything.
Sure.
And the disturbance was large, right? It was like I've heard it described as the size of a 777 jet, or
yeah. So for like a microsecond, I went from being excited that we were going to intercept some drug runners to thinking, oh no, whatever we were after has crashed and is sinking, and now we are on scene search and rescue. And so my heart sank a bit just thinking, man, there could be souls on board. And then the Tic Tac entered, and then I was like, whoa, what? So it was kind of an emotional roller coaster from being excited to being
it's a lot
sad
going
to
on in
being
a very short span of time. Yeah.
right. To sort of later in the debrief, being angry that there might have been a potential blue on blue situation, to them being reassured that it wasn't. So all sorts
Blue
of
on blue on blue. What's
that
blue
it might
on
have been a submarine testing,
right.
a missile fire or something like that, and,
Got it.
and that we could have been sort of vectored into that test range, but it wasn't. It wasn't a test range.
And it flies past. Excuse me. Now I'm hitting my mic. It flies past, and you guys follow, or it comes back to you, or what's the?
Yeah. So Dave Fravor, the commanding officer, and the lead in this flight. So he was senior ranking and also the more senior aviator, and in the position in the flight to engage. He calls that he's in to circle, that he's engaged, and I stay in high cover. So that just means like, hey, I'm gonna hang out up here because I don't know what's going on and I'm not really sure what to do. So he has this strange engagement with it, and it's moving in a way that doesn't follow what we would expect. And even though I was relatively new to the fleet, I had flown enough and seen enough of similar and dissimilar aircraft. So similar being other Hornets and Blue Air or things that are in our inventory, and then dissimilar would be Red Air and things that we would expect to be coming from other adversaries. And we study these. We study the flight envelopes. We want to be able to optimize our performance and be able to outmaneuver or take advantage of areas in the envelope of other aircraft, so that we can get into their kill zone and get a shot off. So we have this discerning, sort of calibrated sight picture, or we're used to seeing turn radiuses, and angles, and just the physics of flight, as we would expect something that requires our normal fuel and our normal propulsion and our normal flight control surfaces, whether it's ailerons or stabs or rudders. We're used to that. And so this didn't have any of those. It was smooth. It was it didn't have a smoke trail. It didn't have any visible means of propulsion, and so we couldn't really figure out how it was moving, both moving quickly and then also seeming to stop and hover or reverse and
because
you have a and you. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was going to say it's essentially moving like something that is massless. in the air, right? It's able to like make right angle turns at speed and like instantaneous, almost like if you were pointing a laser pointer, you could make those kind of maneuvers. But nothing with mass that was affected by inertia should be able to do what it was doing, right?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I don't want to speculate about the mass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
But I'm saying it's
it wasn't
behaving.
adhering.
Yeah, to
Yeah, it wasn't
those
adhering to
rules.
our laws of physics. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Are
and
you
it was something that showed up on radar, so it wasn't just.
Right, and so that's why we ended up there in the first place. And I think, and I didn't. So this is part of the frustration that we had as aircrew, and that I have today is that, in the time since, I have become aware of the fact that they were tracking this anomaly or this anomalous behavior on the radar for days, if not a few weeks prior, and I get that they thought that it was just their system glitching, and they actually turned it off and turned it back on, as you do when a computer is, sort of not cooperating or not behaving the way you expect it to. And so we were the first flight airborne when they were actively getting these strange hits, things that were strange altitudes and airspeeds and jumping around in these strange ways. And so, they vectored us. It was a target of opportunity. They said, "Hey, we've got aircraft airborne. Let's go see if there's something there." I think they were as surprised as we were that there was something there.
Because
there.
this is my question. You were seeing it both with your own eyes and through instrumentation on your plane, correct? Or is it?
So my aircraft didn't get it on our aircraft radar, but the larger USS Princeton radar that's what the air traffic controller was using to vector us.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah,
the trend that they had been seeing. And so, in hindsight, they should have said to the aircrew, "Hey, we're getting these strange hits. They don't make sense. If and when we have a hit when there's an aircraft airborne," because we're not out there 24/7. And this is something that, I think a lot of the folks who are debating whether there is a conspiracy or this, that there needs to be disclosure, that there's all this data and information out there. There's this assumption that there's this 24/7 data collection stream, but there isn't. So in our case, what I wish the controllers would have done is said, "Hey, we're getting these strange hits. If and when we have aircraft airborne, when we're getting a hit, we're going to vector you." And that would have allowed us as operators to have the conversation with each other about what other tools do we want to have? What, do we want to bring binoculars? Do we want to bring, I don't know if we had GoPros at the time, but, do we want to bring a handheld SLR camera? Do we want to bring any night vision goggles, even though it was daytime? Maybe we would just sort of have a UFO hunting kit and a bag ready to go. And then you have those, check that the batteries are fresh and charged, and make sure that everything's set. But in the moment, we were so surprised that our flight didn't even turn on our tapes to record. Because again, we were in an administrative phase of flight. We always turn our tapes on when we're in tactical mode.
Right.
But we were so shocked. We were so sort of overwhelmed in the moment that just thinking through it and making it part of that checklist and procedure that we would have practiced could have brought back more information and more data, which is what everybody craves. Everybody wants to know.
Do you think the fact that that you guys weren't given any information ahead of time, and that like none of the flight crews, like none of on board before going out, that you weren't given that information? Do you think that's just like a result of the reluctance to think the term UFO or to say it out loud or to?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it isn't possible you were sent up there to perhaps interact with it, but I don't know what the protocol is in terms of scheduling something like that, or not wanting something on the record that I don't know. I mean, is it possible that you were, that was the purpose of why you were sent up, maybe under different
That sounds too conspiratorial to me.
I'm just wondering if it's just in like a reaction to stigma, or a reaction that there's just a reluctance to address the notion of a UFO at that point, like in the radar room or in the command center, to not, you don't want to say we're sending you out to look after a UFO, because it seemed like, I mean, from what I've heard from, like, I guess Kevin Day, who was the radar operator, they had a pretty clear sense that what they were seeing wasn't normal.
Mhm.
So do you think there was just the stigma
Yeah,
interfering
I
with
can't
preparing
speculate.
you?
I can't speak to what they were thinking if we're talking about the chain of
Yeah.
command all the way up to the
Yeah.
admiral who was in charge of that carrier strike group. I was a Lieutenant JG. I was only in the squadron for 3 months, and I was, brand new to this carrier operations scene, and so, again, I can't speak to what they were thinking or
Yeah.
why they did or didn't act in the time.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
19 years later, I can be frustrated that there wasn't more done in the moment, that we didn't call a training timeout on all of our pre-deployment practice, and sort of the sense of urgency we had to check all these boxes to become qualified and certified in order to deploy. I wish that they had the balls to say, "Hey, let's do a training timeout. There's something here,
Right.
and we
yeah.
have all these great assets and operators. Let's, launch some more and see if we can't get some better footage, get some better."
Well,
Um,
maybe we should jump ahead 19 years, because as I understand it, from talking to you and hearing you interviewed, that this incident was obviously a big event, but not one that preoccupied your life in the interim. But that's changed in recent years. Like, it seems like it's even changing, even since meeting you at the at the Soul Foundation, and then getting the chance to hang out with you at the Inquiry into Anomalous Experiences and Phenomenon conference that we were just at in New York.
right.
That it's now having an impact on your life in a way that maybe you wouldn't have anticipated over the past 19 years. Like, how is it
So
changing for you now, the experience?
so when it happened in 2004, it was a blip on my radar. It
Yeah.
was something that happened. It was exciting in the moment. Folks talked about it for a few days, and then we were, not that it was a more real issue, but it was a more urgent sense of, hey, we're going to the Gulf.
Yeah.
We're going into harm's way. We're not really
Yeah.
sure if that was a threat. We're not really sure what that was. But so there are things that we need to do in order to prepare for this upcoming deployment. And, I went on with my career, I went on with my life, and it wasn't until, several years later that I got called to provide a more thorough debrief and more answer more technical questions about it. And I said, "Well, what took you guys so long?"
Hmm.
And I was annoyed with that. But then I thought, well, now that I've done this debrief and I've sort of given them the download, that's it. I won't have to.
Who requested that, by the way? Or are you allowed to? I mean, to whom were you
Yeah.
reporting this data?
So folks in the Office of Naval Intelligence. So this would
Mhm.
have been the first iteration of like ATIP
Okay.
Mhm.
before it became UAP Task Force, before it became
Yeah.
Got it.
So it yeah.
Arrow, whatever it is now. So
So this would have been like Lou Elizondo would have been involved in this debrief, or
not the initial one, but eventually, I met Lou in a skiff in the Pentagon talking about this. But so each time I was asked to come back, I was sort of like, "Oh man, okay. You have more questions, or did you not write down what I talked about last year?"
Mhm.
And in some cases there was leadership turnover, so there was a new director, there an administration change, and new folks were appointed. Um, and sometimes they just want to hear it directly and not read it in a report. This whole idea of a credible witness, looking us in the eye and hearing us retell it, which that was kind of annoying. I felt like
Yeah.
you got my bio, you've got the narrative that I told you.
Sounds like being on a customer service call where they shift you to a different operator and you have to say the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very frustrating.
And throughout this time, I'm having my family, I was pregnant or nursing 3 different children.
Yeah. Back to being
So
selfish, clearly. Yeah.
exactly. But, the people say, "Oh, you were asked to come to the Pentagon or you were asked to go to the Hill and talk to Congress." That sounds like a romanticized idea, again, this sort of Hollywood image, but the reality is that you have to fight through DC traffic, and half the time I was in a maternity uniform. I'm pumping in the car in the parking lot, and then like having to go through security, which is like going through airport TSA. It's not glamorous. It's not.
No, it
And
doesn't
then
sound it.
and then you get there, you finally get into the room, and they say, "Okay, tell us what you saw that day," right? And I'm like, "Really? I just told you."
Yeah, tell me something cool.
Last time I was
Yeah.
here, I literally told you. So, fast forward to 2021 when 60 Minutes called and said, do you want to come on? Well, I think the way they stated it was that QAnon has convinced Marco Rubio to include UFO legislation or UFO language in the COVID relief legislation.
Yeah,
Do you want to come on national television and talk about it? And I thought, what?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I never heard that before, that QAnon had any involvement in that.
I don't know. This is all wires getting crossed.
Yeah.
But
I know sometimes news organizations will embellish when they're trying to get an interview.
well, I was actually really impressed with 60 Minutes. They're reputable. I used to watch them with my grandparents when I was little.
Hell
and
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
They
Yeah.
do their
Morley
fact
Safer and
finding.
Dan Rather. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're fact checking, and they're I've talked. I hung up. I told the producer. I said, "Hang on a second," and I called David Fravor and I said, 60 Minutes just called. He said, "Yeah, they called me. I was just going to call you." I said, "What do you think? Is it?" I've been saying no to so many interview requests, and he said, "Well, 60 Minutes is a broad audience, and they do a fair and balanced job of presenting it, and so you could do one and be done," which was a really naive way of thinking about it. So
it's still a huge step, though. It's a huge step for you to come forward publicly like that at that scale. Did you have to think about it for a minute, or were you like, all right, I'm in?
Well, I didn't see it as coming forward, and I don't consider myself a whistleblower. This was never classified, and this was never being withheld or anything like that.
Yeah.
I felt like I was just worn down
Yeah.
by all of the
And your name had been made public just before the 60 Minutes interview too, right? Because I
right,
remember
and so
hearing
that's
your
why I was
name for the first time.
getting right. That's why
Yeah.
I was getting so many of these requests, and so I just said, "Okay." And I felt, as a military officer who had taken an oath and was on duty when this happened, and I was in a taxpayer aircraft, that if there are curious and concerned citizens, that I have this duty and obligation to respond and to share with them, what I can share, and to relay, my perspective, that I don't think that there's a conspiracy here, that that folks who are working the issue, whether it's through now Arrow or at the time ATIP or UAP task force, that these are just people trying to do their job. They schlep through that traffic every day to get to the Pentagon, and they have to spend 45 minutes trying to log in because their password is reset. They're just people. There isn't a big sort of monolithic government with a singular agenda to withhold the truth from the American people.
Mhm.
So, from that sense, I felt it was important to talk and share what I could.
And as a result of that, you've become kind of an iconic figure amongst in the UFO community now.
Right.
And I mean, I've gotten to witness that in person. The attention that everyone is excited to meet you. Everyone wants to hear your perspective on it, and how is that? And getting out and meeting meeting the community. How is that affecting you?
It's weird. I'm an introvert. That's my personality by hardwire, and it's strange to be this and I say this with humility, this hero in this space that I don't understand. I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch sci-fi growing up. I wasn't into UFO folklore or ufology. I wasn't.
I mean, you
I
admitted
didn't. I thought.
you
I thought
admitted
Foo
out loud
Fighters.
that you hadn't seen Close Encounters.
Oh, I haven't seen any of the movies. I haven't seen any of the Hollywood stuff. I haven't seen any of these documentaries, even the ones that they've been interviewing me for. I sit for them, and then I don't know where they end up.
Were you so you weren't so even with your science the science interest at the time, and I know you liked heroes that brought receipts to the it was not a curiosity for you what this was growing up. It was just not in your
No, because Leon Letterman wasn't talking about UFOs.
right exactly right.
Yeah.
This is talking
Yeah.
about science. It's a potentially a science we don't understand yet, but right, it was
Yeah.
outside of your
It's let's
interest
go
range.
to Fermilab for a field trip and
Yeah,
let's smash
that's
some
cool.
particles together and talk about the God particle, the Higgs boson. But
You
it really wasn't getting into all of this extraterrestrial non-human
yeah.
intelligence, or even the sort of from the extraterrestrial to the crypto-terrestrial to the what did we talk about this weekend? We were talking about UFOs as potential afterlife tech
Yes.
and death
Yeah.
barons. I mean, that's all very fascinating to me now that I'm tuned in. But to your question, Dave, is that it wasn't that I was actively evading questions or that I was hiding
Mhm.
information. I just wasn't.
No.
I was living my life and I was doing my
Yeah.
thing. I was deployed to Afghanistan, boots on ground for a year.
Yeah. No, that's what I
I was
mean.
having babies. I was
Yeah.
doing all of that, and then
This is a
the 60
recent
minutes
turn in your life.
the 60 Minutes piece came out,
Yeah.
and rather than doing one and being done, I was bombarded with requests to engage, and I spent about a year sort of saying, "Oh, what have I done here, and how do I engage with folks who are still curious and concerned in a respectful way?" And that's why I opened a Twitter account and said, "Hey, if you want to talk to me about this, here's a space where we can do it. Stop showing up at my house because that's kind of creepy."
That is creepy.
That's very creepy.
And
Yeah. And
there's
again, and I apologize once more. I'm sorry.
Dave,
well,
so embarrassing.
Yeah.
the cops are in
I get
Boulder
I get excited.
Explains the
pretty
sirens.
Yeah.
gentle.
But you definitely I
So
mean, you picked up quite a library in New York of signed books.
yeah, so all that is to say that in the last few months, since being asked to, sort of attend these what I would have otherwise termed fringe conferences, or
Mhm.
when people would come at me with abduction stories, and I'm not saying that they aren't legitimate, but I would just say, what does that have to do with my encounter? Right? I saw something. I wasn't abducted. I didn't have a
Mhm.
sensation of being um, violated or having the loss of control, it is by definition unidentified. Like, we just don't know what it was. It could have been China. It could have been Russia. It could have been Elon Musk messing around. But, I wanted to talk about putting together a systematic method of reporting and a checklist and a standardized template so that when people have encounters, they can get the download and then we can ingest it into this repository, and then we can bring AI and all of our sophisticated technology to analyze it, and then we could figure out not just what we saw, but maybe even predict when we might see something next, right? That's where I'm thinking. And then people are coming at me with like fairy folklore and what does this have to do with sleep paralysis? And I'm just flipping through my notes here from this New York thing. And
Diana Walsh Pazolka's, looking at it from a religious phenomena angle, and
right,
it's like,
the ascension narratives.
yeah.
And so, last year I would have said that's separate, and not to say that it's not important to look into, but it's not related to my experience. I don't understand why people are talking about me and these things in the same breath. And so a few months ago, I finally said, hey, why are they? What's going on here? And let me attend these symposium and conference and just meetings and conversations with an open mind and see what's going on here. And so, yeah, it's almost like learning a new language. I kept having to turn to the person on my left and right and say, and Dave, I think you were on my left in New York. I was saying, what did he say? I'm trying to take notes, and I didn't understand the terminology they were using. I actually couldn't understand the words because it was and is like a different language for me.
There is a whole lexicon in the UFO community. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm, packing my parachute to jump down any of these rabbit holes. I'm not saying that I'm, a true believer. I'm just saying, what has captured this collective imagination, and why are we spending so much time and energy? Why are there so many podcasts about this?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying this from not in a judgmental way, but just now I'm in like a curious way. Like,
Well,
what is this economy?
Yeah. And it's
What is the psychology? What's
one of
the sociology here?
I definitely, one of the things that like Tom and I have been looking at since we started, this amongst the plethora, and I use that word correctly, of podcasts.
I do not think it means what you think it means.
I do an unhealthy redolence and abundance. A plethora is not a good thing. It's not just a numerous thing. It means it's
there
not.
are
It's too
so
much.
many, many.
Yeah.
I don't know where to start. So if I'm reflecting now and saying that not that it was a miseducation of Alex Dietrich over these 19 years, but just that there was, this sort of void of information. Now, when I want to tune in, I don't know where to start.
Well, that's the thing, because it drags you in so many different areas, and it's Tom and I talk about this a lot, that you keep thinking there's an area that you can ignore when you start to engage with this. You keep thinking, well, that's nuts. I don't need to think about that. And then someone shows you some evidence and you go, oh, or it's not nuts. Oh, damn it. And I definitely, I have to say that watching you in both at Seoul and in New York, the graciousness with which you meet these people who are obviously, it's very important to them to have this connection with you. And I guess there's in a sense, in the community, I think the reason people are so excited to meet you and want to reach out to you and connect with you is that there's a reflected seriousness that comes from you, and is kind of gets imparted to other people, that you're involved with this, that somebody who is sort of unimpeachable. It kind of is a balm to the people who've dealt with the sort of ridicule for being involved with this for many decades. And I think I get a little bit of that myself, because when I jumped into this as a dumb TV comedian, even that made people feel a little less isolated. But for someone like you to be involved with this, I think is very, very healing for a lot of people, if that makes sense too.
It does. Thank you for framing that in that way for me. And I have tried to approach all of these folks who want to have contact, who just, it's so fascinating to me that just, liking something on the social media, or, following someone back, then they just gush and they're like, oh man, this feels so good to be seen by Alex. And people who will send me these stories in the DMs where they say, hey, you don't seem crazy, and I don't think I'm crazy. I had this experience. I saw a UFO, or I felt like I was abducted, or, whatever it was, this encounter. And I haven't been able to share it with my family. I haven't been able to talk about it at work. Or I'm a part of my religious organization, my faith group, my church, my mosque, my temple. I would never talk about this in a social setting, in a professional setting. But so here I'm going to give it to you, Alex. And then, now the weight's not all on my shoulders. I'm sharing it with you to carry this with me, to hold this for me. And then I go, oh, thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your story. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know where to put this.
Don't have answers. Yeah.
And getting back to this idea that we need to have a central repository. We need to have a place where people can call in or go to the app and say, here's my experience. I know it's, let's not talk about whether it sounds crazy or not. Like, let's just get the data and the information. And, I'm an advisor to the Enigma Labs. And so you can download their app, not just tell them what you saw or experienced, but also you can, just like any other app, it'll ask you, do you want push notifications? Do you want to get alerts? But for them, it's, if somebody's in your neighborhood or in your area and reports an encounter, you'll get an alert. So you can actually
that's cool.
Go outside and look around and see, and then we can start to triangulate and actually put more and more evidence together. So the story that I ended with at the New York conference was this article I'd read about the neurologist who had somebody come to him with symptoms. I don't know what the symptoms you would go to a neurologist for, maybe headaches or tremors or things like that. And the neurologist, as any good physician would do, did a thorough intake and asked all these questions and said, when did these symptoms start? And the patient, sort of sheepishly said, well, they started, after my abduction. And rather than snickering and rather than saying, that's nuts, that's crazy, the doctor didn't skip a beat and said, well, when was that? Let me get the timeline. And so the doctor treated this individual with respect and dignity and saw this, common humanity, and then proceeded to treat him as he would any other patient, and did scans and gave him relief. I don't know if it was medication or what sort of therapies they did, but this patient went off and went back to their subreddit or their online group and said, hey, I found a doc who didn't call me crazy and actually was able to alleviate some of my suffering here. And so this neurologist unwittingly became the doc to these abductee experiencers. And, in this article and in this research that he published he said, look, I'm not saying that these people have been abducted, but I have here a cohort of individuals who feel like they've been abducted, who've had this similar sensation, similar experience, and I've got hard data here. I've got their MRI brain scans. And there's a trend here. They all are different from normal brain scans, but similar to each other.
Mhm.
And so, again, like, I'm not saying they've been abducted, but something's going on here. So if they were abducted, then maybe that caused this sort of brain damage or this physiology. Or maybe it's this physiology that they were born with or that they developed that is causing them this sensation. And I thought, why aren't more doctors, why aren't more professionals, academics and first responders, and just why aren't all of us sort of getting over our Hollywood conditioning? This stigma that we've been conditioned to laugh and snicker and dismiss people who say, "I'm feeling something different. I've seen something different." And instead, why don't we just pivot and help investigate it? We have
Mhm.
so much hardware. We have so many sensors, from radar and FLIR, RF and optical sensors to MRIs, right? We have all of these tools at our disposal. Why don't we bring them to bear to collect more information in a systematic way and
Mhm.
get some answers?
Yeah.
Because that's what everybody is craving.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it treats the mystery. And I think one of the great things about the way you approach this is, obviously being such a credible witness, a person trained to observe, but also the fact that you're not willing to speculate on everything under the rainbow. I think there's a tendency for people to try to launch in and try to speculate and explain what is inexplicable at the moment. And yet, to your credit, with things like Americans for Safe Aerospace and Enigma, being open to try to gather the information
Yeah.
to
Problem
broaden,
solve.
to broaden our base of data so that the answers will reveal themselves, as opposed to people launching in and trying to pull things from everywhere, where you start to go like, well, we don't know that entirely. We don't know. And I think the mystery deserves some respect, because it is so strange and other, and I think a credit to you for that. And the I think dignifying people's experiences is important. My interest in
Yeah.
this started from an incredibly dear friend who I trusted implicitly, having a story and sharing an experience that was so outside of my realm of understanding that it required me to just, that was my personal ontological shock, was like, how do I reconcile this person who I trust and their experience, and trying to just sort of open the aperture to allow it in. And maybe that makes my world bigger or more confusing, but I couldn't dismiss it because, and we have sort of tried with people that we know, like, or have had experiences, it gives us at least a base, a sort of trust base where we feel like we can share that. With this podcast, for example, just like, because I think people's experiences are real. They're valid. Whatever they end up actually being is, we don't necessarily know, but data is important. Gathering it is super
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. And empathy and just the simple act of listening
Yeah.
is certainly it's a gift to the people that you extend it to, and it's and it is an important action in and of itself. Just listening, I think, is incredibly healing for a great many people who are. There's been a tremendous amount of suffering caused by the stigma, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you're doing a great service, and just listening to people is really quite laudable. So, and I guess with that, I guess we should just thank you so much for extending this time to us. It's been so great getting to hang out with you a bit recently, and hopefully we'll get to do that again. And
I hope so.
yeah, and yeah. So, Tom, anything else you want to wrap up with?
Well, no, I mean, I
Yeah.
think I just think I would love to continue this kind of, hopefully we can keep sort of checking in and having this conversation and thank you for sharing this. Thanks for your service. I would ask you one thing, like Mike, because I love your journey. I love that you sort of, what advice, I mean, for girls who want to be aviators, do you feel like, I mean, is the challenge more internal, like this is not something that girls do? What do you tell them in terms of the obstacles? Are they more external? Or are they more internal? Or like what advice do you give them if they're contemplating becoming a pilot or see it in this sort of old light? I don't know. What's your advice to girls who are thinking about this?
Yeah, well, I would say just go get some hours. So you can go to any airfield and, work through ground school and work towards a private pilot's license. I think that people feel like there's a big barrier to entry there, and that's why, thank you for mentioning the two organizations that I'm really passionate about. The Legacy Flight Academy, which the legacy refers to the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. And so that's an organization that supports and provides opportunities for minority and underserved students to have those, those exposure flights, to just get up and feel the joy and to say, oh yeah, this, I'm feeling funny in my stomach, or you're like, yeah, this is this, I could see myself doing this. If not for a career, then maybe just for a hobby. Lots of I have 3 kids now, and folks are talking about, the sports and the extracurriculars, and I always remind people that flying in aviation is an extracurricular, and there are organizations like the EAA Young Eagles and the Civil Air Patrol that are
Oh, cool.
almost like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts for aviation, that can get kids involved. There are scholarships. The Wings for Val is honoring a dear friend who passed in a training exercise on a training mission. But her scholarship is nested under the Women in Aviation International initiative, and this is an organization, and there's an annual conference, and there are lots of these other groups that will piggyback on the WAI train because they take care of all the logistics. But Whirly Girls, for folks who are interested in rotary wing or helicopters, Wings for Val provides scholarships for girls and young women who are interested in pursuing flight. So, to your original question, just check it out. Go to an airport and find yourself a mentor or get involved in one of these groups and organizations. And I volunteered for Girl Scout Day at the Udvar Hazy, which is the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum out by
cool.
Dulles. They have one on the mall right there by the Capitol, but then the big one that has the shuttle and the Wright brothers, all the planes on sticks, I call them, static displays. And they said, hey, throw on a flight suit and come and make paper airplanes with these Girl Scouts. And I did, and it was amazing. All these girls running around the museum.
Right.
Get a little choked up. But then they gave me a case of Girl Scout cookies to go home with. And I was
Bonus.
like, yes,
Yeah.
total bonus. So there's lots of ways to get involved, and I would say if there's even an inkling of interest that you should run it to ground and see if it's something that you'd be really interested in. There's some people who go out on that first flight and they go, ugh, this is not for me. Just it's kind of like the first time I explored scuba diving. I was like, no, this is not. This is not my hobby. So just give it a chance. Give it
Have
a
your
try.
kids been able to fly with you, or has that been
You still
part of your life
fly?
since you've had kids?
So they're still little. They're little kids. They're just turned 5, just turned 7, and one's just going to turn 9. So we fly a lot commercially, but I don't trust them like little monkeys.
Give them a little, yes. Give them a little.
Do you still fly yourself ever?
I do. Yes, I maintain my I actually have a commercial license through the FAA, but there's two sides of it. One is maintaining the license, and then the other is maintaining your flight physical. You have to go through these FAA physicals every year. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2023, so last year, but like a year and a half ago, and had a full bilateral mastectomy, and then a few surgeries to kind of clean things up and take care of all that. So all that is to say that I haven't been flying in the immediate, just because I'm
That's a lot to
working
be
through all the
dealing with.
medical issues.
Yeah.
But it's a good news story. So they caught it early, the mastectomy, the surgery, caught the
That's great.
cancer, and I share it
see.
openly because I
Yeah.
want people to go get checked, go get your
Yes.
scans,
God, that's so important. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, we're
go get your
delighted
colonoscopy.
that you're healthy and fine and that
Yes.
they got
Yeah,
it early. Yeah.
go get your moles checked at dermatology.
Yeah.
Go get all the
No,
scans.
so
And that's a
key.
lot to be
So
dealing
key.
with when you're also dealing with becoming a celebrity and in the UFO icon.
Yeah, no, people were really impatient. They're like, "Why aren't you getting back to me about my podcast?" And I was like, "Well,
Kind of sort of
Yeah.
occupied right now. Got a
yeah,
little bit on
I'm
my
going through
plate
an
with 3
8-hour
young
surgery."
children and everything else. Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
So, you have to prioritize,
Yeah.
and I tell my students, I say, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So, for those young girls and women who are interested in flying, it's something that will always be there if you want to get started, and you can always go back to it. And I like having it as a sort of a lifelong passion.
Yeah. I once was on a flight with seated next to Buzz Aldrin. And
Yes.
we had a long conversation. It was actually the day after Neil Armstrong died that we were on this flight.
Oh,
But the
yeah.
one thing that I was surprised by is that Buzz never stopped looking out the window for the
Yes.
entire flight. He seemed really still excited about being in the air. And after, and this is a guy who went to the moon, and he still just enjoyed looking out that window on a commercial jet. I found that very surprising.
I'm always and forever a hashtag window seat gal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I always have the window seat.
I always liked the window until my prostate got the better of me. Now I'm an aisle
Well, I
man.
just
Don't
climb over
sit next to
people.
Dave. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I have to go, I just climb through, but I gotta
Yeah.
have the window.
Yeah.
Awesome. Alex, thank you so much. This is great. And
Yes.
thanks for being an inspiration to our next generation of aviators and
Yeah. Or the old
keep,
term aviatrixes.
aviatrix.
Mhm.
Maybe.
I'm up to my ears in my Amelia Earhart research, actually, because she is no
Yeah,
primary.
whatever happened to her? She
I
just
don't know. She's not done much lately. That's all I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have some
she
theories.
just
No, but
ghosted everybody.
she's
Rude.
Yeah.
she's pretty interesting. But this is just great to meet you, and we'll hopefully we'll continue this conversation. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. This was fun.
Thanks for
All right.
having fun. I like to say that it's lighthearted, but it's also a serious topic. So I thought you struck a good balance. I appreciate that.
We
That's
try.
that's our gift to you
We
and the
try.
world.
It's Dave's gift. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
tag along. Thanks,
The gift
Alex.
that keeps giving.
Thanks a lot.
Over
Thanks
and
so
out
much,
here.
Alex. Hope to see you again soon.